So this car is very good and very bad at the same time, and I'm gonna tell you today why. So just keep watching. If we have a look at the design of the car, it does look really good. It does stand out a bit more. We have these really nice design tail lights, this black trim which accentuates the tail lights, and it does stand out a bit more. If we look at the side of the car, it still looks pretty nice. You have a place here where you can see which model you have. This is the cheapest model, so it doesn't show. It's a 4-door model, and it does really kind of accentuate indoors. You see this grooves here. I don't know why. This car is very new and it only has like 200 kilometers on the dash, but it already has some very whack panel gaps on the car, so that totally doesn't make sense. For some reason they gave this cheapest model black mirror caps to make it look more sporty. I think it looks a bit weird on the car, but whatever floats your boat. The headlights look pretty nice. If we look at the front of the car, it is supposed to be like a tiger or shaped like a tiger. You can see we have the tiger's tooth right here, and the front of the car looks pretty nice. You even get this nice grille, even on the cheaper model. This cheapest model does get the halogen lights, and I don't really like those. So I would just upgrade for another one which has the LEDs, and that looks a lot better. So the car is cheap, and it also looks pretty cheap, and in comparison to the GT model I don't really like this, and I don't know why, but this car is really yellow and it looks like a freaking potato. Can you imagine just walking into the dealership wanting to buy this car and just taking this color? I just can't get my head around it. Like, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but if this is your opinion, it's wrong. This car has a massive fuel filler cap. I don't know why. If you're ever going to tune it up to like 1000 brake horsepower, you can use this thing as an air brake. But without kidding, it is this massive ass size because you also have the E model, and then the charger would be here, and that needs a little bit more space. So that's the reason why they have this oversized fuel filler cap. The car doesn't even come as standard with alloy wheels. These are just those black 15-inch winter tires with these caps on them. I don't really like it. I know this is the most cheap option, so you have to pay extra for those alloy wheels, but I do think it really ruins the appearance of this car. Not that it already looks very good, but this makes it even worse. The boot capacity of this car is 311 liters. It's alright, it's pretty decent, but it's a bit less than the Renault Clio or the Volkswagen Polo, but you also pay a lot less for this car than those cars, so it isn't really that weird that you're missing some space or options. So let's talk about the engine. This specific potato has a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder engine which puts out 75 horsepower, and if you want to know the 0 to 60, the answer is yes. The same 1.2 liter 3-cylinder engine is available in a 110 and 130 horsepower option. So if you're going to buy one, I would definitely recommend one of those two, because this thing is just way too slow. You can also get this car in an electric version, the Peugeot 208e, and this specific model will have about 136 horsepower and will be fully electric. So depending on which model of these potatoes you choose, you get a little badge right here indicating which it is. This one is the active model, so the most cheap model you can get. You can get another model which has alloy wheels as standard, a digital dash and LED headlight. Then you have the GT line, which looks a bit more sporty with even better wheels and an upgraded infotainment. And then you have the GT, which gets all of the range stopping options like lane keeping and active cruise control. So getting in the back of this Peugeot 208, let's have a look. Inside the back of the Peugeot 208 there isn't a lot to see. We have really small cup holders inside the doors. The speakers are pretty well. We don't have an armrest and the seats are pretty comfortable. We don't have electric windows. So this is just what you have to do. Old school, cheap, let's get it. And the windows don't roll down entirely, so that's also negative. So having a look at the interior of the 208, we can see that there's a lot going on inside this interior, even in this cheaper model. So we have the infotainment screen right here. We have this boring ass key. For whatever reason you can turn on the lights from the outside. I don't know what it's for, but alright. So we can see in this cheaper model that we don't have the digital dash, we have these analog clusters, and if we have a look at those, you would almost think that you're inside of a Rolls Royce. What kind of Nintendo noise is this? So furthermore, the quality of the interior is pretty good. So if we have a look at the screen or this Lamborghini Huracan-like control set, it really doesn't wobble. It's pretty stable inside of the car. We do have this plastic carbon fiber look-alike something in this car. Furthermore, the seats are pretty comfortable. You do have to adjust it a while before you find your right seating position. And we do have this crazy Game Boy lookalike Formula 1 steering wheel, which I absolutely hate. It's not very good in cornering. It just doesn't feel right while driving. Only if you're driving on the highway and you're sitting like this with your 2 fingers on the steering wheel, then it's okay. But if you want to look at the analog clusters and you just want to have the steering wheel at a right angle, you can see your speed, and the steering wheel is just in the way of everything. So this really ruins the interior of this car in my opinion. They should have just used a normal steering wheel. It's also very, very small, literally like you're holding some type of Game Boy, Nintendo Switch, and this is just too straight and it just doesn't work for me. It looks cool, but it's really shit while you're driving. So a lot to talk about and a lot to see inside of the interior, but let's just go for a drive. So starting off with this car, again, I don't really like the steering wheel. The analog clusters do look pretty nice. I don't really mind those, and the gear shifter is also pretty okay. I'm gonna keep the airco turned off because it does make a lot of noise in this car. And the first thing I want to talk about, except for the steering wheel, will be the pedals of this car. So the brake is pretty responsive, so if you press it only a little bit, then it'll just brake. Very nice, pretty short pedal. The clutch, however, is already a bit deeper in this car, and I don't know why, but the gas pedal is really deep in this car. So that also doesn't make it very easy to find your right seating position, because one pedal is very deep and the other one isn't deep at all. So it's pretty weird trying to get it right. But furthermore, it shifts pretty nice. It is pretty quiet in this car. If you want to compare it to something like the Toyota Yaris does make a lot of engine noise and isn't as isolated as this car. So that's a pretty big positive for me in this car. I really like that. And coming back to the steering wheel, you see how I'm cornering? I just have to do it with 2 hands, and it just doesn't feel right. And if you just want to be one of the boys and just drive like this, it feels really weird. It just doesn't make sense. Furthermore, this indicator stalk and the cruise control stalk are very close to each other, so sometimes you press one while you're trying to press something else, but you can get used to that, so that doesn't really matter too much. This car does have 75 horsepower. It isn't very fast. It's just your everyday city car, and very positive that it is quiet. So we're also gonna do a bit of highway today and just have a look at the road noise of this car and how it performs on the highway. It is pretty good on fuel, so that's probably one of the reasons why you're going to buy a car like this. So yet again, weird cornering. There we go. And I just get a lot of revs in this car, because otherwise you're just never gonna make speed and get the highway. Someone is driving way too slow over here. So let's go. So there we go, just driving over 100 kilometers an hour. It's not bad. It still doesn't make a lot of noise. Let's put on the cruise control. Whoop. So 100 kilometers an hour. Because we don't speed, we never speed. I drove about 100 kilometers in this car. I picked it up with 180, as you can see right there. So I picked it up with 180 and I drove 100 kilometers. And when I picked it up, the radius was about 600 kilometers and it's now on 540. And I do have to say, it didn't even take off one of the fuel bars. So I don't really know what the exact mileage has been, but it is pretty decent. So nothing to complain about. Something I do find pretty weird is these mirrors in the car. They're pretty small, but very wide or bulky kind of. Sometimes you don't really get very good visibility, or you're not very sure if you can overtake someone or not. The interior mirror isn't automatic dimming as you would expect, so it's just with the flip of the switch kind of thing. And also, while we're at it, we can have a look at the infotainment. So one thing I do find pretty weird is this air conditioning system. So it doesn't have physical buttons right here. You just have to fix it here while you're driving, which can be a bit distracting, especially on moments like this. So this interface is pretty nice with all of these buttons. It would have been even more nice if they just had like physical climate control buttons or air conditioning buttons, because this, as you can imagine, isn't the safest thing while driving, because you're fixing buttons, fixing the position of where the air goes, and then going back to your set navigation. So speakers are alright in this car, better than I expected for such a cheap car like this. When you're inside of this car, you kind of forget that you're driving a potato, and then you look in the mirror and you see that yellow paint. Maybe if you get the GT or the GT line model with all of the nice trims and bumpers and interior, maybe it looks a bit better like that. So it does have start stop. I don't know how much I like it. I just personally choose to turn it off all the time, only it doesn't have a physical button here to turn it off. So that's pretty irritating in my opinion. There we go again with this Formula 1 great steering wheel. Model doesn't have the adaptive cruise control. I'm not the biggest fan of adaptive cruise control, so I don't really mind in this case. I do have to say it's a pretty comfortable car for the price that you're paying, all of the options and everything else, because it's, just as I said, it's pretty quiet while driving, doesn't make a lot of road noise, it's pretty slow, but I guess you know that when you're going to buy the car. So all in all, it isn't that bad. What's my final verdict on this car? Should you buy it? Should you just leave it? Or should you consider it? Well, if you're looking at the Allure model or the GT line model or even the GT model, I would definitely recommend you consider this car. It's a pretty nice car and it's a bit cheaper than a Renault Clio or a Volkswagen Polo. That was it for this week.